Then when it comes to Golden State and LA, geez, like that is
Sign me
that
up.
is yes, that is must-watch TV.
Let me put you on game.
Uh,
Another debatable topic is this whole NBA play-in tournament. Like it's getting a lot of flack from the players, and it's interesting how much it seems to be turning up the heat on some of the game's kind of biggest superstars, LeBron James in particular, who said whoever what was his quote? Whoever came up with this idea needs to be slapped.
fired, but I mean, he probably meant slapped as well. But
Yeah, by those big King James hands, they could
yeah,
catch these 5 fingers.
yeah. It's a weird season for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Especially if you're thinking about the pandemic and the condensed schedule. But yeah, the play-in is a new addition this year. They experimented with it a little bit with the Western Conference in the bubble last year, but the play-in this year is its first year in its full-fledged form. So LeBron is a little ticked off, but likely because he's actually in danger of being in the play-in. I think if he was the first or second seed, I don't think he would be hearing about anybody getting fired. But I mean, I
Yeah.
understand it's a lot easier to complain about something when it's directly affecting you. But how are you
Yeah.
feeling about the play-in overall? Like what are your feelings on it?
So I love I think it was Colin Cowherd or someone else that kind of explained the NBA season as what's interesting are not just the games, but the drama around the games and how you can create such an interesting narrative around certain things that are happening. Every year around this time, we start to have the MVP debate, the most surprising team debate. A couple of years it would have been a Toronto or Milwaukee when they first came up, or the Bulls. A team to come out of nowhere and get 60 wins. That would happen every year, or the 73 win Warriors. That was a conversation at that time. And so this whole play-in scenario has added a whole different layer of drama, and it has made it so that more teams are competitive. Ultimately, more teams really have a shot to make the playoffs, and it really devalues tanking. Now it's about, hey, try to get into the playoffs, do your best shot. And when it comes to the worst teams in the league, they get even less press and coverage for who's going to tank to get the top spot. And that's kind of what you want. Even though it's been a bad year for like teams like the Timberwolves, teams like the Rockets, they still have interesting rosters with talent, and they still compete, and they're not just tanking for the sake of it. They're just
Yeah.
bad. you know
Right. Yeah.
and so it's kind of, or like a Detroit. So I really like this whole playing environment, and I think it's added another layer to the drama that is the NBA season, because it's really a gruel to get through. So I'm digging it, And if you're gonna put fire under anybody, and it's LeBron, that's gonna create a lot of buzz, and it's gonna make for some really interesting basketball. You just hope. I think the NBA is really hoping that he gets into the playoffs, because the playoffs without LeBron is not a very watched playoff. So it's kind of they're walking on shaky ground right now.
Yeah. If anybody can get from a playing situation into the playoffs, though, it's definitely Braun.
Yeah.
He's been dragging corpses to the finals for a decade now. So yeah, I'm like, it's not too worrisome if he can actually get into the playoffs. But I mean, it makes it really, really interesting. Like you said, it's added a whole, like you said, it's added a whole different level of drama to the end of the regular season. Because prior to this, the end of the regular season was more just like waiting for the playoffs. Like once you got past the All-Star break and you got like a month or so out, like most teams were starting to rest their players. Tanking teams were really just mailing it in, talking about we're going to play this, guy averaging 6 points a game for development or whatever other excuse they had. So it's kind of put the illusion into lots of mediocre teams' minds that they can compete for a playoff spot. Like the Bulls are hella mediocre this year. Like they're 10 games below 500, but we're like 2 games out of a playing spot. So in previous years, they might have just thrown in the towel, but they're actually thinking about like, hey, like we need to try to compete because, we're out now. But if Washington would have lost last night and then lost their last game of the season, and then if we won, if we would have beat the Nets tonight and then beat the Bucks, which is very, very unlikely, but just in that scenario, like we would have made it and they wouldn't have. So that level of drama before a play-in tournament, which is already its own level of drama, is
Yeah.
great. And then you like you said, you combine that with the leveled out lottery odds, and that's a deterrent to tanking. So it makes for better basketball going towards the end of the season. It improves the product. So I'm definitely a huge fan of playing. I really hope they keep it. I know a lot of players are going to be trying to get it out of here, but I definitely hope they keep it. And we have an interesting set of matchups.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have to talk about the East too much because
I mean,
outside of
the East,
Washington, it's not really all that interesting because you got the Celtics with the Jaylen Brown wrist injury, so he's done. So
yeah.
there's that. I think the Hornets are interesting with LaMelo and Terry Rozier, even though they're missing Gordon Hayward. But the Pacers, so before we get to that, let's just talk
Sabonis.
about the. Oh well, let's just go through the East because we're both familiar with how the play-in tournament works. So let's get our predictions down. So if you had to pick between the Celtics, Hornets, Pacers, and Wizards, who are your 7th and 8th seed?
So 7th and 8th, I think that Charlotte actually has a decent chance of beating the Celtics because the Celtics are just going in the wrong direction. It's kind of disappointing to see how good of a coach we thought Brad Stevens was, but just how much the Celtics have been underperforming even before the Jaylen Brown injury. They were middling, barely out of, they've been middling in the 7th and 8th seed for a while now. And we thought they were going to turn it around, but they just haven't been able to. And I think that once LaMelo gets back, he's kind of playing with like dumb luck. Like he's playing like he deserves to be there. And you love to see that in a guy like him. So I think that Charlotte is going to end up locking in that 7th seed. And it's going to be a very interesting matchup between, I think it's kind of a foregone conclusion. I think that Beal and Westbrook are enough to take out Indiana, obviously. And I want to see that. I want to see Jason Tatum. Like, let's see how close to Kobe you think you can be. And let's see him take on a dynamic duo in Westbrook and Bradley Beal. And let's see what happens. I think that's going to be a really compelling game. And I think that ultimately Washington, with the dog-mindedness of a Westbrook, hopefully he doesn't take the last shot and they leave that to Beal. and and it's going to be an interesting matchup for that 8th seed, and I think that Washington can get it.
Yeah, but those are my picks too. I would go Washington and Charlotte, and by the time the show comes out, we'll be well on our way to figuring that out. Next week we can probably go over our picks and see if we got it right. In the Western Conference, we have 5 potential teams in the play-in because the Blazers and Lakers are in a fight to see who's going to end up in the play-in. Lakers are at a disadvantage right now because they're a half game back. But let's just operate with the standings as is, because I think that's a lot more interesting. I think Lakers, Warriors, Grizzlies, Spurs is a lot more of an interesting matchup than Blazers, Warriors. Well, actually, you know what? I can't even say that because Dame versus Steph is must-see TV. It's all so great. This is why I was like, let's just get past the Eastern Conference. Let's go to the West because this is way more interesting. Who are your picks with Lakers, Warriors, Grizzlies, Spurs?
So I think starting off with the Grizzlies, I want to see Ja Morant in another March Madness type of environment. And I think he can shine when the spotlight's on him. So I'm really fascinated to see that matchup. I think the Spurs are out. I love the way they played against the Knicks, and the Spurs have the effort there, but their talent level and their outside shooting is just not good enough, and it shows by their record. They're just not good enough. And so I think Memphis can take them. Then when it comes to Golden State and LA, geez, like that is
Sign me up.
yes, that is must-watch TV. Steph in all his glory this year, shooting the lights out. I think the Lakers can do it as long as, I don't even know if you need 100% Anthony Davis and 100% LeBron, but if they're on the floor, and you throw enough defense at Steph, he's capable of beating them, but he also needs some type of spacing to shoot. And I think that the Lakers do a really good job on defense this year. And that's really what has allowed them to stay afloat in the absence of Davis and LeBron. And I think they're going to continue to do a good job. And I think they're going to put Steph in a bind. In the playoffs, in a play-in situation where you have to stop one guy, and that guy is Steph, I think the Lakers are going to do that. And I think that they can lock in that 7th seed as a result. So, but it's going to be, you always got a puncher's chance when you got somebody like Steph on your team. So never count them out.
Yeah, for sure. I'm tempted to go Lakers at 7 and Warriors at 8. I mean, not Warriors, Grizzlies at 8.
Okay.
I'm tempted to go Lakers, Grizzlies, but I think I'm going to have to go Lakers, Warriors, just because of what the damage that Steph could potentially do in like a 1-game scenario is crazy.
Yeah.
Like if he put up 50, in multiple games during a play-in tournament, it wouldn't be a surprise. So I think it's either Lakers, Warriors or Lakers, Grizzlies. But I'm going to have to go Lakers, Warriors.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, I'd agree with that too. Yeah. Yeah. If, even if Memphis was able to beat San Antonio, I don't think that they could beat then the Lakers or the Warriors. So I think that's pretty safe.